Hello and welcome to this episode of Connected. I'm Cherry Reynard. Today we're here to talk about Funding Happiness, a new book written by Dynamic Planner CEO Ben Goss, which explores how people can work with advisors to bring about a happy, financially secure future. So welcome, Ben.
Hi, Cherry.
Now you've spent much of your career sort of building tools to support better financial advice. What was the thinking behind writing a book for consumers?
Well, there are a number of things that came together in truth, Cherry. I mean, first of all, our purpose at Dynamic Planner has always been to help people get access to better financial advice and to make it easier to provide advice. Today, we talk about our mission, which is to unlock trusted advice to millions of people. And we know how powerful financial advice is. We also know how difficult it is to get. It's difficult to get because it's difficult to give. And this book came about in part because we were talking a lot about how do you close the advice gap? How can we play a part in helping depending on the study you see, 10 to 20 million people who would benefit from having some financial advice, but today don't access it. And at the same time, a lot is changing, right? A lot is changing both in the technology sphere. So we've now got AI. A lot of people, if you read the press, they'll say over half of adults are now using ChatGPT or some other chatbot to ask questions about their finances and gain financial advice. And at the same time, regulation is changing. So you've got the move from consumer duty now into the advice guidance boundary review. First came targeted support and now simplified advice. So regulation is changing, and regulation is opening up the opportunity, the possibility that millions more people could get financial advice. And so what we wanted to do was really share to both advisors and consumers. This is a book for advisors to give to clients and prospective clients, right? What the data is showing about how powerful financial advice actually is. We can see from our data that somebody who has received financial advice is typically twice as confident about their finances than somebody who hasn't, who's chosen to go it alone. And that confidence actually, even if you hadn't had advice in the last year or two, that confidence stays with you. Our data shows that that people really get a lot of confidence from the trusted advice that when they get trusted advice. And so we wanted to share that data really in an effort to help more people understand the power of financial advice and help financial advisors articulate the value that they're delivering.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a real problem with the sort of proliferation of advice in inverted commas now. There's a lot of information out there, but it's not necessarily great information. I mean, I know you've spoken before about seeing poor investment practices firsthand, sort of early on in your career. I wonder if you could talk about that and, the extent to which that sort of shaped the mission behind the book.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a student in environmental science and geography way back when. I had a summer job at an investment manager, and every day you would turn up, you'd be given a script. This is in the 80s. The company in question would put adverts on the tube and in the Sunday papers, and people would phone up and they would ask us in this little call center, what should I do with my money? Sometimes tens, even hundreds of thousands of pounds. Very often older people who couldn't really afford to risk the money that they were putting in. But, at the time, stock markets were going up. and the brand behind these adverts was quite strong and quite compelling. But essentially, people were told a story about how these investments had performed historically, and they made investment decisions off the back of it. Of course, in 1987, Black Monday, a lot of people lost a lot of money. The UK stock market lost over 40% of its value ultimately. And a lot of those people will have lost, a lot of savings they really couldn't afford to do. And, as I went on in my career in financial services, it began to be very clear to me that the information asymmetry, the information that the industry had versus the information that the average consumer has, and still has, I would argue, I'll come back to that, is just very, very different. And again, the book is all about how can we provide more helpful information to consumers, clients of advisors, yes, but also prospective advisors, which is why the book is designed for advisors to give to prospective clients, to help them think about the process of financial planning, but also at a very high level, how does risk work? How do investments broadly work? Because of 1987, because of the 2000 crash, because of 2008, because these things hit the headlines, too many people have a view of investing as binary. If I invest my money in the stock market, I could lose all of it. But that is just not how modern investing works anymore. If you picture a seesaw, if you sit right at the end of the seesaw, your investments could go up quite high, and you could also lose quite a lot. But you can actually choose, if you're a kid, sometimes you choose to sit in the middle and you go up and down a little bit, or in halfway out, and you go up a bit and you go down a bit, but you're not going to lose everything. And over the last 2 decades at Dynamic Planner, we've been really pioneering the use of risk-based investing and risk-based investment planning. And what we can see from the data, and what now thousands of financial advisors with over 2 million clients have seen, is that very clearly you can manage those ups and downs, and you can use risk to achieve the things that you want to achieve in life, to fund happiness, as I call it in the book, because essentially a lot is known about how investments perform, and in a globally diversified portfolio, you can ensure that you're not taking more risk than you absolutely need to. So I guess, Cherry, it's been a bit of a journey from over the last 20 plus years of helping advisors articulate to their clients and prospective clients what risk means in the context of a financial plan. And the book is just another step towards helping explain those kind of those concepts.
I mean, you make a clear distinction in the book between kind of funding happiness and sort of chasing wealth. I wonder if you can explore that a bit. Why just being really rich isn't the goal.
Well, I think it's a great question, and it's actually where I start in the book. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that question and looking at what everybody from Aristotle to Barack Obama have said about wealth. People who have thought about this a great deal, and the kind of punchline is that wealth in and of itself is not enough. Wealth is always a means to an end, whether that is a healthy life with friends and family, whether that is being able to be financially secure so that you can look after your family, whether it is being able to set up a business, buy your home, to be able to make a contribution to society. Wealth is almost always a means to an end. And what we see from the data, and this book is based on advice given to over 2 million end clients from thousands of financial advisors is that the best outcomes are always managing to align what the person really wants and needs with their ability to fund it at a risk that's right for them. So they're kind of three components, if you like. One is getting clear on what really matters to you as a human. Now, we had over 100 advisor stories contributed to the book. And time after time, what advisors said about what really works is when you can have a conversation with a client about what is it that you really want. If you're planning or investing as a couple, what is important to each of you? There's a fantastic story about how a new prospective client goes in to see a financial advisor, and the advisor says, what is it that you want from your life, to the husband, and the husband says, I want to sell my business for the most amount of money. And he turns to the wife, same question, and the wife says, I just want my husband back to be my husband and a father to his kids. And I think in that little vignette, you get the picture, right? That money means different things to different people, for sure. Getting clear about that as the first step in any financial planning process is fundamental, because then you can look at the funding piece. What resources am I going to need to bring to bear to make this happen, to make this life that I want happen? And key to that, the amount of resources that you need. And most of the time are underfunded for the goals that they want to achieve. As human beings, we tend to be wanting animals. We want more, not all the time, but that is very true for many people. And what advisors tell us, and we can see in the data, is that the discussion about how much risk you're willing and able to take is fundamental to you being able to achieve the goals, the lifestyle that you're looking for. The challenge with that is that, again, most people come at this cold from a view that says, if I'm going to invest my money, I could risk everything. Well, that's just not true. So there's an educational piece there. But taking risk makes most of us unhappy. In fact, the behavioral science says that on balance, taking risk makes people twice as unhappy as actually getting benefit does, or getting a good return makes them happy. So there's a kind of asymmetry there. And the advisor's job, and this is proven time and time again for over 2 million people, is to say, look, actually there is a balance to be had, and the way to square the circle, to be able to invest at a level where you're comfortable, where in bad markets, and there will be bad markets in any long-term investment journey, you're not going to bail out at the bottom because you feel so uncomfortable. The trick here is to find the right balance for you, so that you're clear about the goal that you're looking for, you're clear about the resources that you can bring to bear on it, and that you are clear about the level of risk that you need in order to achieve those things and stay happy on the journey. And the book really is about how do you create a happy journey, a happiness along the way, as well as achieving the end goal, because you get any of those two things out of balance and it's much more challenging.
Yes, I mean, presumably there isn't necessarily a correlation between people who are good at generating wealth and people who are good at kind of managing wealth. I mean, so ostensibly quite smart people can still make terrible long-term financial decisions.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, I spent a lot of time researching how well do DIY investors do. And there's some fantastic research done by a company called Dalbar in the US, and they've been looking at this again for decades. And the short answer is that against the market generally, investors do about half, DIY investors do about half as well, right? So time after time, people take investment decisions on their own that just don't work for them in the long run. Whereas study after study, and major firms in this country, Quilter, Vanguard, have all discovered this in the value that they see advisors bring. That advisors help you take the right level of risk for you in the first place, and they are able to profile how you feel about risk. They're able to profile your capacity to take risk. They'll be able to have a conversation with you and your partner if you're investing together, for example. But then they can also manage the risk of your investment. And when you get bad markets, they encourage you to stay the course. And that role of just staying invested is so crucial, because if you miss even one or two of the best days in the market, which typically will happen after a crash or after a down market, if you've exited the market at that point, you'll miss some of the best returns, which is what typically happens to a DIY investor. And as a result, over the long term, you end up, on average, according to Dalbar, almost 50% worse off than if you'd have stayed the course. So you're quite right, Cherry. The ability to make money over the long term is a function of, actually, it's not a function of being a brilliant investor. It's a function of making sure that you've taken the right level of risk, and that that risk is managed for the long term.
I mean, the book very much sort of tells the story of money through human stories, to kind of bring it to life. I wonder, from your point of view, how much of financial well-being is the maths, which I suspect as a financial industry we tend to focus rather too much on, but also how much is about sort of psychology and behavior and trust?
Yeah, so I mean, so much is about trust. Dynamic Planner, we talk about unlocking trusted advice, and the reality is that consumers, we as individuals, can have the best information, right? We can even go on our phones and get pretty personalized answers from a chatbot, but without trust, we don't take action. Trust is like the wind in an investor's sails. Without wind, the boat just goes nowhere. And what we've seen from the research in the book is that if you are able to gain financial advice, you're going to be a lot more, typically twice as confident as somebody who doesn't. You're much more likely to stay the course, and as a result, you're much more likely to achieve the goals that you set out in the first place. We bring 20 years of data looking at how different risk profiles have performed, and you can see that if you left your money in cash, 20 years ago, you would be certain £100 would be worth about £775 today. Even in the high risk scenario of a reasonable range of kind of retail investments, even at a high risk scenario, your worst point would have been worth only £80. So there is so much that is known about investing. The challenge for the consumer and for the advisors is, how do you build that trust? And early on in the book, what we wanted to do was just to talk about the role of the financial advisor as a coach and as a consultant, as much as a source of expertise around investments and expertise around tax, both of which are really, really important. But it is that coaching role, that understanding of what is really important to you, that is critical in building trust. Aristotle said there are two things that are hard in this world. One is stone and the other is knowing yourself. and it is very, very difficult to get to know yourself. And a trusted advisor will essentially hold up a mirror and be able to say, look, what is it that you're really looking to achieve here? In the data, we can see, so we looked at this 10 years ago, and we looked at what words were people using to articulate their goals and objectives. Now, a decade ago, the industry wasn't brilliant at having these kind of conversations, except in pockets. And so the big words you see used are pension and ISA and investment. Those aren't goals, those are products. And I think it would be fair to say, it would be fair criticism to level, that the industry has very much come from a product-led standpoint. Now, when you look at the data, you see a much better, a much more real set of words when you look at what are people looking for. They're looking to retire securely. They're looking to pass wealth on to the next generation. They're looking to pay off their mortgage. They're looking to go to buy a camper van. Camper vans come up a lot, hence the fact there's a camper van on the cover of the book. So there are much better questions that financial advisors through behavioral science are now able to ask. And a lot of the book is based on the 4 characters you mentioned. They're based on the data. They're composite characters, so we can't see individuals in the data, but we can see these different groups of people who, are trying to achieve different things, and advisors are asking just brilliant questions. And there are many examples in the book, brilliant questions about, ultimately, what is it that is going to make you happy?
It's interesting because I'm guessing that coaching role from advisors is becoming more and more important as people are increasingly being asked to take responsibility for their own retirement. So before, you would entrust it to, I don't know, the government or your company or that sort of thing. But with the advent of defined contribution pensions, it's increasingly in the hands of the individual. So, I imagine that's more important. And so, trusted advice is more about making better life decisions as well as better money decisions.
I think that is absolutely right. I mean, we live in a much more transparent age, right? We live in an age of YouTube, the internet, TikTok, and now ChatGPT and AI. And this technology is available to anybody. People are able and are using these technologies to discover much more about what makes them happy. Life goals, life coaching is one of the main use cases for some of these chatbots. In the context of that, though, how do you achieve the thing that's going to make you happy, and what does happiness really mean for you, is still a question that requires challenge. One of the great examples that was given to me as by an advisor was talking about 2 different couples who had broadly the same objectives, and that was to retire and to travel around Europe and to do it in a camper van. Now, one couple, they wanted a brand spanking new Mercedes camper van. I think these things cost £50,000-60,000 off the showroom. They definitely like the champagne lifestyle. Another couple were very happy to kind of rent a camper van for a couple of weeks a year, and they were much more into having a cup of tea. Ultimately, you could see a picture where both of those couples are on the same wild European beach, drinking their favourite tipple. They're doing the same thing. They're just doing it in, the cost of doing it for each of them to make them happy is very different. And those fine distinctions about what really is going to make you happy, what really will you miss if you weren't to do it, is what great financial planners and advisors are about. Because once you've understood that the goal is, so actually you want to travel, you're happy to rent the camper van, you don't need the finest things in life, you just want to be with your partner watching sunset on a European beach somewhere. Funding that once or twice a year is very different from having to fund the capital to buy the amazing vehicle, to have the Mercedes logo, and so on. And different strokes for different folks, right? But you can see in the data that those people who get clearest on those objectives have the highest chance of achieving them over time.
Yeah, yeah. You don't need to be the hottest thing on the campsite. So circling back to
that
what
is
you
true.
said,
Sorry to go. That is true, but for
yeah,
some people, that is really important. For some people,
yes,
status,
yes,
brand is really important, and that's fine so long as you've got the resources to be able to fund it. And the key conversation that advisors tell us they have time after time is, okay, is this, the hottest camper van on the block? Is it really affordable? Do you really need it? Yes, I need it. Okay, but your resources are here. Are you willing to take the risk to achieve this quite expensive thing over here? Or I think taking that level of risk will make me unhappy. Okay, so can we achieve the same thing with your partner? You're traveling, you're in a beautiful wild European beach, but it costs you less and you can take less risk. Very powerful conversations.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or you could do it earlier,
Or you could do it later. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
again, a lot of financial advisors will say, you're 100% right. You've got the risk piece. Time is key here. And, I go back to it. Many people in the world that we live in, where the government isn't going to look after you, where the state pension is pretty minimal and increasingly so in relative terms, you may have to work longer. But the beauty of concepts like compound interest, which again, advisors find a really powerful explanation. Most people really don't understand what compounding is. Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. We take quite a lot of time in the book to explain how it happens. No matter what level of risk that you take, as long as you take some, the compounding effect of staying in the market produces some really amazing returns the longer you leave it. So you're quite right. Even somebody who, isn't 21 anymore, and there's a whole section on this. What happens if I'm in my 50s and I'm underfunded for retirement? I want to stop working, but I don't think I can afford it, which is a position that many, many people are in. The power of compounding, taking some risk, not going overboard, but taking the right level of risk for you, understanding what the need actually is. What lifestyle are you really going to make you happy? Is it champagne? Is it beer? Is it a cup of tea? And then how long can you really give yourself? You're in good health. If you keep working, the power of compounding, the returns that are available to you if you take some risk, those discussions. And the book is all about showing the data that shows how powerful that can be, with the aim really of advisors giving it to clients to help the client understand more about the planning process and engage more in it. The aim is that the advisor gets a more engaged client, and of course that the client then engages in the planning process in a wholehearted way.
Okay, great. Just a couple of questions to round off, Ben. I guess one would be, what would success look like for this book? I mean, sales, obviously, but, in terms of its impact.
Well, I mean, we want to have an impact, first of all. So all profits of the book go to Urban Synergy, a youth mentoring charity that has a financial education program. We're really passionate about financial education. So one measure of success will actually be making a contribution to Urban Synergy and the great work that they're doing in schools, predominantly in Southeast London, which is where I grew up. But look, what we're all about, and what this book is all about, is helping advisors engage with clients and prospective clients in the planning process. So it's designed to be given by advisors to clients to help them understand a bit more about the planning process and the key questions in that process. We are in the process of digitizing quite a lot of content. So that content will be available to advisors to make available to their clients in lots of different formats on mobile app, for example. We're super excited about using some of the concepts that we worked so hard to create in the book around what does the risk mean? What happens if you leave your money invested for a long time? All of those things, how much better off you'll be if you work with an advisor, how much more confident you'll be. So yeah, we're looking really to help play a role in closing the advice gap and getting more people engaged in planning, and the content in the book is a mechanism to do that.
And if readers were to take one thing away from Funding Happiness, what do you hope that would be?
That's a great question. I think that financial advice needn't be scary, that advisors are used to talking to people like you. If you have a flick through the book as a prospective client of an advisor, you'll see that you'll get asked some really good questions, that it's not about products anymore. It's all about you. It's all about understanding you and helping you make the right trade-offs and to stay the course. And millions of people have had access to financial advice. About 4 million people a year get ongoing financial advice. And there's another 10 that could benefit from it. And we thoroughly recommend read the book, talk to an advisor, and you'll soon see why those people that do take advice are twice as confident with their money as those that don't.
Okay, great. We will wrap up there. Thank you so much for those insights today, Ben. Funding Happiness is available on Amazon and at launch hit #1 on the personal finance charts. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners for joining us today, and do please join us for the next episode of Connected when that hits. So until the next time, goodbye.